Okay, we are now live. Thank you.
Okay. Morning, everyone. You got to turn off your. Thank you for coming with us today and participating. I'll announce the applications in order listed on the agenda today. We have two zoning. Jennifer, our senior planner, will summarize her findings. And these zonings are as a result of consent applications. So we're going to call the meeting to order at 9:25. And the first thing is the territorial land acknowledgement. Before our meeting gets underway, I would like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Alma-Calderman is located on the Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe. The Township of Alma-Calderman respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nation are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. As you can see, we're having a little technical difficulties with our system, so please bear with us. Are there any disclosures of a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Be it resolved that the municipal planning agenda of Thursday, January 27th, 2022 be approved with the addendums. Item number 7, addition of another delegation, re the short-term rentals, Ms. Sullivan and Jay Ling. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Phillips, second by Deputy Mayor Gibson. All in favor? Carried. Item 5. This was the municipal planning meeting of Thursday, December 16th. Be it resolved that the municipal planning minutes of Thursday, December 16th, 2021 be approved. Sherry?
So, yep. Mayor Latchford, I just wanted to point out, I would like to approve the minutes, but under section 11 delegations, there's a section that speaks to my comments. And the last word in that is typed in as president, and it should actually be precedent, P-R-E-C-E-D-E-N-T. And perhaps I wasn't clear probably when I spoke, but if it could just be just noted.
Thank you. And we do have a legal matter to deal with these minutes. So is there another way, Pat, that I should word this other than approved?
The legal matter will be dealt with in a closed session, Madam Chair.
Yes, so we can just leave the minutes then as approved the way they are today.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
moved by Deputy Mayor Gibson with the correction and Councillor Hogg. All in favor? Carried. So we go into our zoning applications, and the first one is James Starr. This is item 6. Z-01 2022, bylaw number 05-2022, concession 10, part of lot 21, geographic alderman. Do you want to speak to that, Jennifer, please?
Good morning. Through you, Mayor Latchford. This application is for a zoning bylaw amendment for a property located in, concession 4, part of lot 10. It's on the north side of Browns Road. The purpose of the application, oh, sorry, I got the wrong. I'm having difficulty with my agenda this morning. Please bear with me one moment, please, while I find the correct report.
That's where it is. You sounded right.
Not sure I had the right lot and concession, so.
Lot 21, concession 10.
Lot 21, concession 10. It's a property at beside 146 Browns Road, owned by James Starr. This property was subject to a lot addition application, which added lands to 146 Browns Road. The property is a 0.4 hectare lot located on the north side of Browns Road, and it's currently zoned development in the Township of Alma-Calderman zoning bylaw. The purpose of the development zone is to protect larger properties from scattered development that would preclude future in-depth development. This 0.4 hectare property could not be further developed. So it's recommended that the property be rezoned to the Hamlet residential zone. The property is located in Fenella, which is a designated settlement area. The application was reviewed by all agencies. No concerns were raised. There are no natural heritage or natural hazard features on the property that would preclude development, and the property is not regulated by a conservation authority. During the review of the lot addition application, the manager of public works reviewed the application and determined that there was sufficient room and sight lines on the property for an entrance permit, and the property is suitably sized for private municipal services. So the recommendation is that the property be rezoned from the development zone to the Hamlet residential zone to permit the construction of a single detached dwelling. Notice of this application was circulated to all landowners on within 120 meters of the property on January 7th, and a sign was posted on the property that same day. No public comments have been received.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from council? No, this is just based on the consent application. Ready to approve this to be moved forward to the bylaws, which is item 9. We've received public comments on the application, if there was any, so could I have a mover, please, to approve the recommendation? Well, I got 3. Deputy Mayor Gibson and Councillor Booth. All in favor? Carried. And the same situation with the next one. It's Curtis and Liz Wilson, Z02-2022. Bylaw number 06-2022, concession 3, part of lots 11, geographic Alderman. You can just briefly with that one as well.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Latchford. This application pertains to a property in part of lot 11, concession 3, geographic Haldeman, owned by Curtis and Liz Wilson. This property is located in Vernonville, which is a designated settlement area, or partially located within Vernonville, a designated settlement area. The northern portion of the property is, the northern portion of the property is located within Vernonville, and it is zoned development in the Township of Alma-Calderman zoning bylaw. There were a number, I believe it was 3 or 4 previous severances from this property, 4 previous severances from this property, which front on Shelter Valley Road. and North Street. These severances have largely stripped the development frontage or the frontage of the property, making further in-depth development of the lands located within the settlement area difficult. So while this property that's being partially rezoned is larger, it's not really developable now, given what's happened on the property in the past. So it's recommended that this portion of the property be rezoned to the Hamlet residential zone to permit a single detached dwelling. Again, I did receive a couple of phone calls on this application asking if there would be an application for a subdivision or if more than one house would be permitted. And this application will only permit one house. If they were wanting to subdivide it, they would need an application for a plan of subdivision.
Okay, thank you. Council? No comments? I'll read this then. That application Z-02-2022 to amend the zoning on a parcel of land owned by Curtis and Liz Wilson, legally described as part of Lot 11, Concession 3, Geographic Township of Haldeman, from Development D to the Hamlet Residential HR in the Township of Haldeman zoning bylaw 19-2019 be approved as amended. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Hogg, second. Councillor Booth. All in favor? Carried. So, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, that has to move on to the bylaws today. Thank you. And our next item is item 7, and it's delegation. The first delegation is from Valerie McDonald, and we have 2 others who are wishing to speak, and this is on short-term rentals. So I have a motion. I can have Valerie speak to this.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Gibson, second. Councillor Hogg. Okay, so the first one will be Valerie McDonald.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm Valerie McDonald. Thank you, Mayor. And this is a delegation presentation to Alnwick Haldeman councillors. I live on 6108 Curtis Point Road in the municipality. This presentation is concerning short-term rentals, commonly referred to as Airbnbs. We have included a petition with signatures from residents, mostly in the 6108 Curtis Point Road area, but some are from other parts of Alnwick Haldeman as well. Due to Omicron, it was very difficult to collect signatures, and this is only a representative indication that most people do not want to permit short-term rentals, Airbnbs, in the municipality. But if a bylaw is going to be passed, such bylaw should be, according to the petition wording, quote, very restrictive, taking into account preserving safety and the enjoyment of property and lifestyle of those living in or already paying taxes in the neighborhood and the municipality. My presentation will focus on the potential loss of business income to existing municipal businesses already paying business taxes from operations like resorts and cottage rentals. It will also look at the loss of housing and the further driving up of housing costs. It will look also at the potential conflicts and liability issues surrounding non-waterfront properties and water access. Having looked at other bylaws, this presentation will outline potential restrictions that a bylaw in this municipality could include to address issues ranging from density and proximity to other houses to licensing fees and enforcement. Firstly, in a time when the provincial and federal governments are supporting the rejuvenation and growth of the tourism industry, and in this municipality, that includes accommodation, recreational activities, and eateries, allowing the unfettered proliferation of short-term rentals by individuals and not businesses eats into the available revenue of those established ones that do pay municipal taxes and who support municipal events and organizations. Not so with absentee landlords who would have no vested interest here and are investing in housing property only to make money. As you will see from the petition, even two restaurant owners in this municipality who are not located on Rice Lake or Lake Ontario have supported having no short-term rentals at all, but that if the municipality creates a bylaw, that strong restrictions be imposed through it. Secondly, the price of housing continues to skyrocket. Recent studies show the shortage that impacts new home buyers, renters, and people wanting to move from urban to rural areas in retirement or to raise their children. There is a whole generation that can't afford to purchase a house, while those buying houses to create short-term rentals drives the price of homes up even further. This is investment, but not home ownership. The housing stock in Ontario is short about 650 homes. That's according to a study. I don't know I have said in this presentation that at this time, I believe that is to a certain future year, and I don't have that. I'm sorry. But anyway, we have a shortage in housing stock, being the point, while resorts are scrambling to get rentals to keep their businesses viable. And there is something very wrong with this picture. Thirdly, investors are not only buying waterfront properties, but they purchase land and houses on back lots with shared and or deeded water access. It breeds potential conflict with owners of the property and the renters of the non-waterfront properties. If I were a fisherman or woman wanting to spend a weekend or several weeks with my kids fishing and doing other things, I would monopolize the waterfront with boats and water toys, etc. At the same time, however, full-time and seasonal neighbors on our street actually share this same deeded access. Recognizing when someone's grandkids or teens are there, they give them more time to be alone on that shared deeded waterfront. But those on vacation who rightly expect to have access through all of their valuable vacation time, if that is what their absentee landlord advertised as part of their rental package, would not do this sharing. Perhaps any bylaw should identify that deeded access doesn't extend to short-term renters because the absentee landlords, that is, are not there to enforce the sharing. Fourthly, there are also increased liability issues for the municipalities due to fallout and bylaw enforcement related to water access, water collection, garbage collection, parking, fireworks, campfire permissions, and location. And these same issues can result in more calls for police and fire, driving up operation costs that can be reflected in an increase in the OPP contract, for instance, and for more responses to fire complaints and actual calls to the municipality. What are some of the restrictions that could be put in place in a bylaw to provide safety and security to existing neighborhoods? 1, impose a density restriction. 1 only every several kilometers, for instance. And if there is a resort already located there, this must factor into the density of short-term rentals permitted. 2, impose a restriction on how close a short-term rental house can be to a home where someone is living, which could address potential noise, potential fires, potential loss of privacy issues. So I'm talking there, the actual distance from one house that's being rented to another house where someone is living. 3, don't permit grandfathering of short-term rentals that have and are continuing to pop up. They should only be allowed and licensed if they meet all of the criteria set out in a bylaw that the municipality is looking to put in place. The following is a case study, and I'm using 6108 Curtis Point Road, Rural Route 2, Roseneath. I live on this road, house number 32, and have for about 9 years. This road has about 60 lots with housing on it. And the lakeside lots and cottages are pretty much cheek to jowl, to use that expression, or very close to one another. Many are being converted from cottages to full-time homes. And this has been going on for years as it transitions to a permanent residential neighborhood. I am on a backlot. I have a direct invested interest in the proliferation of short-term rentals in my neighborhood and impact on my quality of life and that of my neighbors. Currently, following the sale of my neighbor's property immediately to the west of me, a contractor has been renovating in order to, as he tells me, rent to fishermen. Before they left, my same neighbor who sold told me that they had sold to an investor in short-term rental properties and not to someone who is going to be full or even a part-time neighbor. My house is only about 10 feet from that property's house, which changed hands last fall. When those same contractors started a fire to burn materials for renovations, it was in the front yard, only feet from the house they were renovating, and a garage as well. It was in high winds, blowing embers towards the backyard full of leaves and the wooded area behind, and towards part of my house. I told them about the fire bylaw and need for permits, and suggested the location probably would not support a permit because it was so close to things. After several days of fires, I contacted the fire chief here in this municipality. He came and he told me he contacted the owner about the municipality's fire regulations. When I and my late husband purchased our property, we knew that at the far end, we are in the middle of the road approximately, was a full-time resort and a more part-time resort. So too. But we also knew that those rentals were not on our doorstep. This has now changed with Airbnbs in various locations on this road, starting up without regulation and bringing in people who rent unsupervised and leave without any consequences for their actions while here. There are two in the immediate area east of me on the lakeside, only several hundred meters away. This community also has a number of other single older women like myself, and also single older men. Security and safety hasn't been an issue previously, but with rentals right next door and close by has become one. Ensuring a potential Airbnb short-term rental bylaw meets all strict regulations and requirements for licensing and is policed. This could go a long way to regulating a sector that is currently out of control. I know this isn't an unknown issue for the municipality, and the council has already received some complaints. An early report from Alnwick-Haldeman's own planning department stated in part, in reviewing short-term rental websites, while there are listings throughout the municipality, there appear to be more listings for waterfront properties on Rice Lake. Many listings advertise accommodations for large groups of guests, 8 to 5, and the township has received complaints regarding large party groups causing disturbances on short-term rental properties, unquote. And as I say, that was from a report from your own planning department, an initial report. Other municipalities in Ontario are also dealing with complaints from residents, and that includes those here in our own county. Brighton, for instance, used Prince Edward County's bylaw as a sort of template. Its mayor has already said that proposed bylaw went to Northumberland County Council this week. It addresses issues of density, maximum occupancy, parking, a definition of what short-term rental is, and whether to allow them in non-tourism areas where they could be in conflict with other land uses. Brighton also used a survey to get resident feedback. The early municipal report from Alnwick-Haldeman Planning Department I referenced earlier suggests these kinds of things to be in a bylaw, and we support that, these items. Establish limits on the number of people per guest room. Establish the maximum number of guest rooms. Identify parking requirements. Establish a code of conduct for renters, which could include, among other items, an exclusion use of waterfront deeded access and right of ways to where shared access could become an issue. Limit the number of licensees to be held by one individual. Require preparation of site plans and unit layout plans. Require unit inspections and allow the revoking of permits for violations. Each of these provisions needs to be spelled out in detail. They are certainly not all of the inclusive safeguards, but just some that we have noted. For your information, I have not yet read the new planning report. In conclusion, roads and streams in the municipality should not have any dominated by short-term rental accommodation. That is already happening on 6108 Curtis Point Road and needs to be halted and reversed. And the same should happen in similar locations. Okay, so there is another person, Karen Valcor, who has a separate delegation application. And she was going to look at more personal items. And at this point, she's just texted me to say that her screen would let people in. But apparently she hasn't been let in. I could give her a message if you wish, or perhaps your technical person has seen that she has joined.
Okay. Susan?
I'm
You have
not seeing anybody in the waiting room. If she comes to the waiting room, I can most certainly let her in.
Okay.
We want to make sure she has the right number.
I gave her the Zoom.
Okay.
And it does, here's what it says, municipal planning, my host will let you in soon. So I am going to text her, if you would like, to use the phone dial-in that you provided at the top of the agenda. Shall I do that to ask her to phone in?
She can try the link again as well.
Okay, so try to.
Yep. And if she comes, I can let her in immediately.
Okay, I'm just texting right now.
If she's having a little difficulty also, we could let Janet speak first.
Okay. Okay, so I've just sent that off to her now. I'll see if there's any response.
Thanks, Valerie.
Okay, thank you very much. Were there any questions?
I was just going to ask council if they had any questions for you.
Thank you.
Councillor Phil?
Thank you very much. And Valerie, I'd like to thank you on behalf of council. That was an excellent presentation and obviously a lot of homework done there. I would like some clarification on waterfront usage and the limitations of waterfront usage to non-waterfront residents. Can you elaborate on your position there so that I have a better understanding?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll use my personal example. So my house is number 32 and residents on the left side and the right side of me on back lots, I think 5 or 6, all have the same deeded access. In fact, I have 2 deeded accesses for my, as part of my deed from my premise. I don't know about the other neighbors, but the way that it works on the one that is closest to all of us is it's an access that is wide open. Neighbors have come together and put a dock on it. We maintain it, keep it lawn moored, pick up, branches that fall and that kind of thing. And for instance, my former neighbors that just sold and moved, they had grandchildren. And when they would come down, we would let them have the space to take their water toys down there and their boats and everything and give them some privacy. They also, I have grandchildren as well. And when they were younger, we would often do that together. There is another one of these 5 or 6 neighbors that have deeded access to the waterfront on this lot who come down, and they are mostly teenagers. So when they come down for a weekend and they come down with friends, we give them the opportunity to enjoy that without trying to also use the area. It's just being good neighbors. And you get that because you are neighbors. You're living next to one another. You are thoughtful. But when you have a renter who's been told by an absentee landlord that, oh, yes, and you have access to the lake this way, and you can use these things, which in fact, you know, they haven't been part of putting in place or maintaining, then those renters who are there for that weekend or that week or whatever, obviously would expect to be able to use it as much as they want from early in the morning to late at night. And I can tell you that some of the people to the east of us who are on the waterfront, who have been operating as Airbnbs, their people are out on the road all hours of the night and fireworks going off all hours of the night. So there's nothing to think that that wouldn't also take place on the shared deeded access. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
And Valerie, the deeded accesses aren't that large. Can you give an estimate of the size, or do you know the size
Okay, so
roughly?
I would guess it's long and narrow.
Yeah, more like a wide lane than a lot.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't want to put
yes.
words in your mouth,
Yeah.
but that's
No,
what I'm thinking.
I would say like a double laneway at that location and not a lot size.
Yeah.
I would say it's about half the size of my lot size. And my neighbor, I think on both sides are double lots.
Yeah. Okay.
Except I should also tell you this new one that's coming on place is only 6 inches off the property line. So that's why it's such a short distance between their house and mine.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions for Valerie? Seeing none,
We haven't had anybody in the waiting room, Mary Latchford.
okay. If council, you're okay, we can move on with Janet, and perhaps Valerie, you could get a hold of Kieran.
Okay, I should probably tell you that Karen has started a new job. It involves working with an elderly person. So
Okay.
it may be she is just unable to. We all knew this was a possibility. You do have her written presentation, and I would encourage council, if you haven't had a chance to read it, she has a very personal experience because she has 2 right in front of her home, which is a full-time location. She has some very good ideas.
Yes, and I've spoke to her a couple of times. She's phoned me very concerned, so
Yeah,
we'll do that. But if, without it being available right now, we could move on to Janet.
yes, and thank you. I think we do have a really good understanding. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Okay. Janet? Can I have a mover to let Janet speak? Deputy Mayor Gibson, second. Councillor Phil. Okay, our next delegation is Janet Sullivan. Sullivan.
Yep. Can you see me?
Sullivan. Yeah, I can see your name here now in front of me too. Hi,
Can you
Janet.
hear me? Hi,
Yes.
can you hear me talking?
Everything's clear.
Okay. So first, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We're very happy the bylaw is being proposed. And to clarify, it's not because we want short-term rentals, but since they're already happening, we see the need for restrictions. We have a few points for consideration and/or clarification. The first is about the site visit and decision. Upon receipt of an application for a short-term rental license and the next steps of a site visit, we're wondering is it a given that the license will be issued if the points mentioned are met? For example, the building and fire code, parking, etc. Or will the site visit consider the entire neighborhood? The proposed bylaw does state it may be refused if it's adverse to public interest, but we hope that public interest means the inspectors will look at the community. How many other rental properties, including cottage resorts, are located in the vicinity? Is there privacy between the property and other homes? Is there fencing or hedges that denote the property lines? What is the condition of the road, etc.? We suggest that the property owner present a recent water test and the inspection ensures that the well is in good working order. We suggest that the septic holding tank should also be inspected. We believe there are existing septics that would not meet current regulations and have been operating on a grandfathered basis. As many short-term rentals will be on waterfront properties, we feel it's important that they meet current regulations. The second point is about enforcement. 2.2 states that officers shall be responsible for the enforcement of this bylaw, but we want to ensure that means the officers will actually be attending complaints as opposed to receiving a complaint and then just phoning the owner to take care of it. 5.13 outlines how the licensee will provide the township the name and contact owner of and the owner's agent who must be there within 60 minutes when there's a complaint. The licensing bylaw also contains a clause that allows for revocation. So we're concerned if the purpose is to have the owner take care of the complaint, we feel this would not provide integrity in the process. For example, evidence for infractions would not provide a cumulative history of complaints. Complaints could be attributed to neighbor disputes and could lead to further disputes in the neighborhood. It's also important that a professional who has expertise with the bylaws knows how to proceed with charges, how to prepare a case for court, how to provide necessary evidence, and can ensure charges are being addressed through the appropriate court systems. Having a professional attend and view the situation would alleviate many concerns. This should be spelled out clearly in the bylaw. 3.4 looks at the number of guest rooms and addresses the maximum number of renters, including non-occupying guests and residents.
Sorry.
Yep. Can I continue?
Yes.
Okay. We're saying the stated maximum should be stated in the handbook and clarify how that relates to tents and or campers that sometimes happens on these sites, how those numbers are going to be included. The handbook that is mentioned that in 1.25 and the Renters Code of Conduct, it states that the owner has to ensure renters receive a copy of the Renters Code of Conduct. We suggest that this package be provided to the property owner by the township along with the license. We think that expecting individual property owners to research all the bylaws, print them out, and then have them available to renters is not realistic. Whereas having one person who's familiar with the bylaws provide them in the package would alleviate the, I didn't know, I had the old bylaw, I couldn't find it, etc. excuses. Each year when the license is renewed, the newest bylaws would be provided in the package. The owner would be responsible for adding their site-specific information. For example, garbage day, is there a septic or holding tank, and those instructions, drinking water versus washing water, etc. So just to further clarify that, the way it's written now about the things that must be available to guests, like it says 5.23, a copy of the current noise bylaw, say what it is, which I know Jennifer has put in the package about the noise bylaw, but then it comes down to fireworks, specify the restrictions and then attach it. Because I think renters are not going to read through all those pages of things. They're going to show up to their vacation with fireworks and they're going to want to set them off. Similarly, the open air fires, specify what it is and about the burn permit and how to activate it. The one thing I didn't see were animal bylaws, which I think should be added to it, particularly rules that animals must be leashed when off private property. And we suggest that prior to the public meeting, if that goes forward, an actual example of the package is published online. that would contain what the individual bylaws are, so that residents, property owners, and others that are knowledgeable about the pertinent legislation can see them there. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, one more question. What is the mechanism for residents to report properties being rented out without a license? I didn't see that in the bylaw or report.
Okay. Thanks, Janet. Any questions,
You're
council,
welcome.
for Janet? Seeing none. I have one for you, Janet. Is it a
Yeah.
big issue or a continuing issue with pets being brought by the short-term renters? And
Well, it does happen, and some people just allow their dogs to walk around the road. I'm not saying it's, so this whole restrictions about short-term rentals is just coming up now, right? We live on a road that has many rental cottages, but they have their own rules about pets, so.
yeah, I just hadn't heard that as a big issue, but not saying that, you know, it could become that. And it depends on some of those dogs, right?
Well, and I
They
think
need
some
to
people
be,
think
well, they
when they
need to be
come,
leashed.
right, and some people think when you come to the country, that dogs can just wander around and, you know, dogs don't pick up their own poop, so they kind of need to be with a person.
Yes, yes, okay, thank you. Now, did we get Karen back on?
Yes, Mayor Latchford, we have, oh, I think she's gone again. She was here.
Okay, we'll just give her a second to get back on.
Okay, I'm admitting her back in.
The connection today, probably from up our way, is quite poor. There she is.
Good morning, caller. Can I get your name for roll call?
My name is Karen Valcour.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, Karen, we've heard from our other two presenters in the delegation, and we can hear from you now. Thank you. Just get
Thank
to
you.
council, a motion from council to have you speak. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Booth, second by Councillor Hogg for Karen Belcourt to speak. All in favor? Carried. Okay, go ahead.
Good morning. So my topic this morning is Airbnbs. I live on Curtis Point Road in Roseneath. And currently on our road, there is 5 operational Airbnbs and 1 is in the works of being converted into an Airbnb. My concern with this is the people that I am aware of that are doing it, they have no licensing, no permit. There is hazards all about their property and inside their buildings. I have submitted documentation with not pleasant reviews from people that have been there through Airbnb. Because we have municipality access on our road as well as deeded access, my concerns are who has to police that, if anyone. If there's injuries or an accident or damage and it's on the municipality or on deeded, who also is responsible for that? I know that the one Airbnb that operates directly across the road from my house, I've witnessed and I've submitted images to Bylaw. There was 26 cars there over the course of one weekend, all at one time, over 40 people in the house. There was guns, prostitutes, drugs. The police were called repeated times. Things that occurred in the house escalated and went outside onto the road. You know, it just brings violence into our community. The other house that is right beside this other one really should have been condemned. It's had the main load-bearing wall removed from the house. It's full of black mold. The foundation is heaved and cracked, and it's a huge danger for anybody who was to go in it, and a renter wouldn't know that. There's been dogs running aimlessly that should be leashed, because the people on the road, we all know each other. So, and we respect each other and put our animals on leashes. And unfortunately, the guests that come to our area are not respectful at all of those who live there, you know, year round and pay their taxes. It's just, I think because we're on such a small road and we already have two resorts, that one is fully operational and the other one is in the process of getting operational again. We are less than a kilometer long on a dead end road, and we have 6 Airbnbs and 2 full-size, you know, cottage rentals. It's just, when is it going to be too much for one little road to handle? You know, and I had operated a guest house in the municipality. I approached who did I approach? I can't remember at the moment, but anyways, I was advised at the time when I was doing it that I couldn't rent for just one night, because that would classify me as a hotel or a motel. I had to have a 2-night minimum. I had to change the way my taxes were classified because I was operating it as a business. I had to show that I had proper insurance coverage, so that if there was a problem, that I was covered and responsible for my guests. You know, there was a lot involved when I did it, and maybe it's because I did it properly, I'm not sure. But, you know, this one particular group of people that are operating, they still haven't come down to plow their driveway. Their dock is about to fall over, and there's comments on the Airbnb post where it's a safety hazard. So it's just, you know, can there be a licensing, or can there be inspections, like, you know, twice a year? I'm at a loss.
Okay, thank you. We are working on this bylaw, and glad to hear from everyone. Does council have any questions for Karen? No? Okay. So I can thank you for your presentations, and they will go to staff and council. Jennifer, do you wish to say anything about this before we move on?
Well, I don't know whether you want to talk about it now, or we do have the planning report that contains draft licensing and zoning provisions for council's consideration, so we can discuss it there, whatever you would like.
Some of the things basically have been addressed in this.
Yes, I believe they have been.
Might need tweaked a little, some are fine, but, or should we have the opportunity for staff to look this over after the presentations and tweak this? What do you want, council? What's your wish?
Well, I guess I would like council's input into the draft provisions that are suggested in the planning report, and under council's direction, if you want me to take a different approach, I can look at that. This report was prepared at council's request when we had a preliminary discussion about Airbnbs. Council asked me to prepare a report that contained regulations and provisions for it. And so that's what I did. The previous report contained a number of different approaches taken by different municipalities, and the licensing bylaw that is included in my report reflects the provisions that, in my review, seemed to be the most comprehensive, and at the same time would be, the municipality could be capable of achieving and monitoring and looking after those bylaws. There are some bylaws out there that contain provisions that are much more difficult, I think, to enforce, and would take a lot more staff time.
Okay.
But we can discuss that when we discuss the report, if you'd like.
Okay. What's your wish, council? Do you want to review? I've got scratches across mine and highlights, but there were some things that I didn't think about that have been brought up today. Sherry?
I think it makes sense for us to move on to the report, and then we can discuss what's in the report, what we've heard this morning, which I think are, you know, there were some really valuable information and comments. And I want to thank all four of those presenters for taking time and interest in this. But I think there's still some things that we need to give consideration to. And if we can move on to the report, we can discuss that in detail.
Okay. Councillor Phillips?
Yes, I agree. And I think some of the salient information that was brought forward today in today's presentations could come under review so that we can make the most comprehensive bylaw that we can operate with. And I think Jennifer's point is well founded in that, you know, it has to be something that we can service. You know, it doesn't really make much sense to have a bylaw that we can't enforce. And we are a small municipality. That being said, we want to make it as tight as we can. So we'll review all further information. I'm sure that Jennifer is interested in reviewing the presentations that happened today as well. I'm sure she probably may have a tweak or two as a result. So I support Deputy Mayor Gibson's idea of let's have a look at the report and then go from there. Thank you.
Okay. The other thing to keep in mind is on the weekends when the renters have these places, it's usually council members who get the call of what's going on and the complaints. So to get things in these bylaws that, you know, prevent some of that, I don't mind answering the calls. I'm not saying that, but on the weekends, we can't do anything too much about it. So it's been a great concern for some of these people, and especially along Curtis Road, to the point where, you know, I've heard from others who aren't on today and we're quite concerned about their safety and staying in their places all weekend, and to the point of not even letting the children out to play. So that we've got a lot to deal with, I think. But anyways, we can carry on today as you wish. So do you want this presented? Sherry?
So I'll make a motion that we bring Jennifer's report forward for discussion.
Okay. Can I have a second? Councillor Booth? Okay, here we go. Jennifer? Do you want just, are we going to do questions, or are there certain things in here you wish to highlight since you've heard from people?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Latchford. This report was prepared on council's request for information regarding licensing and zoning for short-term rentals. Because as we discussed, we have a number of them in the municipality, some of which we have received, I believe, a number of complaints about, and some that we have never received complaints about. So I have received one letter from a Airbnb operator in the municipality who has, I believe their house has 2 units in it. And to my knowledge, we haven't received any complaints about that particular one. And they are very interested in this process because they want to ensure that, you know, that the licensing wouldn't preclude them from doing Airbnb. So I just wanted to say that we do have some that we have never received any complaints about, and we have some that we have received numerous complaints about. So it's a balancing act. So what I have suggested or presented to council in the report is a draft zoning bylaw amendment, which would permit short-term rentals in a number of zones, as well as a definition of short-term rentals that would be included in the zoning bylaw. And in addition to a licensing bylaw that would go through the Municipal Act that would require Airbnbs or short-term rentals. There are different platforms that people can rent their properties on. A licensing bylaw, and the nuts and bolts are in the licensing bylaw. It contains the regulations about inspections and number of rooms and all that sort of thing, and it contains more information. So we'll focus on the proposed licensing bylaw, which includes a definition of short-term rental accommodation. Now, I did receive a phone call that said that my definition in the licensing bylaw and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment are slightly different. So I will have to check those to make sure that they're reconciled. We don't want different definitions in different pieces of legislation that are affecting the same thing. So basically it defines short-term rental accommodation, which means the renting of a whole or part of a unit for less than 30 consecutive days, but it doesn't include a tourist establishment. So under the licensing bylaw, all short-term rentals must be licensed, and during the licensing application process, they have to submit a building floor plan that identifies all the buildings. They need to submit a site plan, which will show their parking area and the parking plan for the property. They would be required to have a parking space per guest accommodation room. A lot of complaints that we get about short-term accommodations or short-term rentals are they're not parking in designated parking spaces, they're parking all over the roads, that sort of thing. So if a short-term rental accommodation application was for 3 rooms and they only had 1 parking space, well, that one they wouldn't be able to get a license for 3 rooms. They would be able to get a license for 1 room because they don't have sufficient parking. The licensing bylaw also requires building and fire inspections. So when you submit your application, you submit, and understanding that we're at the preliminary stages of this. We don't have an application form yet and all of that, but what I anticipate is they would submit their application form, their site plans, their parking plans, and then building and fire would go out and do an inspection to ensure that the rooms that they are proposing to use as bedroom or accommodation rooms are actually considered accommodation rooms or bedrooms under the building code. That's important. And that there are the appropriate smoke detectors and that sort of thing at the unit for safety purposes. So that's being recommended. And we're recommending, in accordance with the building code too, a maximum of 2 persons per guest room. So when you see, I don't know if I've spent more time on Airbnb right now than I ever have in my life, but sometimes you'll see places advertised for can occupy or can 10 people occupancy. But then you discover that there's 3 beds and one in a basement and 1 actual bedroom. So what they're advertising does not necessarily meet with what would be considered a bedroom under the building code. So it would be an attempt to or a way of us trying to have a look at these places and say, okay, this is a 1-bedroom cottage. It's good for 2 people, not 10. And I think that would address some things. So they would be required to provide a site plan, a building layout plan, and a parking plan. as I said, 1 parking space per guest room. And the parking spaces have to be on a hard surface driveway, which is generally a gravel driveway, asphalt driveway, that sort of thing. What it means is you can't park on the lawn. And their parking plan will illustrate where the parking spaces are. We prepared a draft renter's code of conduct, which would basically owners would be required to provide to their renters, and it gives that it reminds people that they are in a residential area and how to act accordingly. Now, the zones. Yes.
Proposal.
And
Just before you go on, I want to ask a question. The building being reviewed, does that going to include septics? I think that's a valid question by those living on the lake.
if we,
They've had to update that themselves, probably. And, you know, is there a history on whether or not these places have updated septic systems or not? And if it's a 1-bedroom place, can it handle, you know, 10 to 40 people, that septic tank?
well, see,
It's
that
only
was,
supposed to have 2 people there.
well, that was it, because the septics are designed for the number of bedrooms and kitchen fixtures and whatever for a house. So that's the purpose of the building inspection, would be to identify the number of guest rooms. So if it's 1 guest room, it would be 2 people. That would be the maximum occupancy. Right now, the draft licensing bylaw does not require a septic inspection or review by Northumberland County. If we do include the septic inspection or as a requirement, I think it is a $750 fee from Northumberland County for a septic inspection. Now,
That's maybe $750 might be safer than what's going into the lake.
I'm not sure of the fee, but I think, is Daryl still here? Oh, yep, there's Daryl. Is it?
And
is
Sherry
septic-
has a question as well.
Is septic fee $750, Daryl?
I think for a new septic, it's 800. I think a review is 400 and some.
400.
We just have to be careful. I'm not disagreeing that septic review shouldn't be done. We just have to be careful because the building code states unless you're increasing the daily flow, and when you're increasing the daily flow means you're adding a bedroom or adding new fixtures and stuff, then you need to have septic review. If they're not adding bedrooms and they're not adding new fixtures and stuff, I get that they're adding people, but if they're not adding those, then we have no enforcement to tell them that they need a septic review. If the county starts a, and this could be county policy, if they want to start a re-review inspection of different septics, then that will be up to them. But we can't force them to do a septic review, to my knowledge, and I can look a little more into this through the building code, unless they're doing an addition that will add more daily flow.
Okay, but it seems to be one of those things that makes, in
Common
some
sense.
cases,
Yeah, and if,
in some cases, I mean, all of them wouldn't probably need it if you're out there inspecting and you know the building, but some of the older places may very well need something like that. But anyways, thanks for your answer. That's something that we can look at. Deputy Mayor Gibson.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't want to get too far off course with Jennifer's report, but I do think while we're in this conversation, I did want to weigh in. I think Janet and John made a good point about septics not being up to current standards. And, you know, we've run into this in other areas, you know, especially when many of those short-term rentals are going to be waterfront. And I can appreciate that maybe we do not have control over that area, but I think we need to pay attention to that either in the inspection or some way so that we have some sort of control over ensuring that we're not polluting neighbors or the lake.
Exactly. And then if they add tents and campers, are we going to address that, Jennifer? If somebody, you know, brings a trailer, you get a couple of families bringing the tent.
Well, the licensing bylaw would specify the number of rooms. We could put an exclusion to campers and tents and that sort of thing. I hadn't realized that was an issue. We could prohibit. I mean,
well, we have to be careful with that because those who live there full time could have a couple of grandchildren come down,
Exactly.
sleep out in the tent, but they're not doing it every weekend all summer long, where an Airbnb has that potential. Oh, got hands up now. Councillor Booth and then Councillor Hogg.
I guess through you, Your Worship, to Jennifer, I'm reading through the document, Jennifer, and if we're talking about 2 people per bedroom, I guess an issue I would have is when maybe you're renting it and only 4 people are actually sleeping there, but you have 50 people show up in the daytime.
Yeah.
That's pretty excessive on the septic system and stuff like that. And I don't see anywhere where, and maybe I've missed it or whatever, that is addressing how many people can actually be there.
no, I don't. It's not in there. There is nothing in there. I don't know. By the same token,
I mean, it would stop them
somebody
if,
who lives in their house could have a 3-bedroom house that would be for 6 people and have a wedding of 60 people at their house too. So it's hard to, I honestly, at this point, I don't know how you would regulate that. I think that what you can come back to is the parking requirement that you have. If it's for 3 bedrooms, you've got 3 parking spaces, and then it would be a bylaw complaint. We receive a complaint, the complaint's investigated. I believe the licensing bylaw contains wording such that 3 investigated and bylaw complaints that, you know, where orders have been issued, then the license can be revoked.
yeah, and I guess a good point raised by the mayor too was what happens if there's 3 bedrooms, so you're allowed 6 people and then they start setting up tents in the backyard.
I think we could word it that in the licensing bylaw, so it would be for licensed Airbnbs, that additional accommodation through the provision of tents, campers, or other temporary structures is not permitted.
Yeah, and I agree with Daryl. I think the septic is going to be something that's going to be tough, because obviously the septic that was put in there for that house at that time was acceptable, right? For the amount of bedrooms and whatever the criteria was. So whether or not there's 2 people in there or 6 people in there, the building code allowed that type of septic for that house.
But now that house is getting a different status. It's getting the rental. Councillor Hogg?
Yeah, Jennifer answered pretty much my question, but somehow we're going to have to limit the people, because if there's only 2 people for 1 bedroom, and then 50 people show up in the afternoon and they rent a porta potty, then they're going to think they're going to be legal. So it's got to be, somehow we're going to have to limit the parking and the people.
Yeah.
Well, and sorry, Jim, I think that too has been addressed somewhat in the noise definition. I don't know what the exact wording is because I don't have it right in front of my, right, but you know, like no excessive outdoor or backyard noise. So, maybe there's a way to control it that way too.
I'm just thinking we have to cover the loopholes somehow.
Yeah,
So we're not going over this and over this and over this constantly.
yeah.
And there will always be people, Jim, I could see people thinking right now that, oh, to get around the parking, I'll just have a school bus. And I'll bring in 50 people to the house and drop them off and come pick them up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you can only do so much. I like the bit about the parking, right? Because that's really gonna limit, people coming up on the weekend to party or whatever.
Daryl, did you have your hand up?
No, I just wanted to let council know, I mean, even though they're having 50 people here and it's a different than just people living in their house, these are still single family dwellings. And that's what the septic's designed for originally through the building code, is a single family dwelling. Number of bedrooms, makes the number of occupants, like Jennifer said, through the building code. That's what residential is, 2 people per bedroom. And that's where you get the occupancy load. And that's where the load for these single family dwellings comes for septic design.
Right.
So I mean, it would be worthwhile to get maybe county septic inspectors involved as well for their review. I mean, nothing's to say that they can't come on site and have a review of the property when fire and myself is there. So it could be, just another part of it. So
Has it come up yet at CBO meetings with Brighton doing the Airbnb, and other municipalities are dealing with this as well?
yeah, we've had numerous chats about them, and everybody's in the same boat. They're just right at the at the starting stages right now. A lot of it's education, and a lot of the municipalities are working towards a bylaw, something similar that we're doing, Brighton's doing, or we're proposing, I should say, not doing, but proposing. So everybody's still, everybody's in the same boat, and at the start in our county anyways, from what I've talked to. So
yeah, and our homeowners, that we don't want to limit their guests for, you have a little family function, but it's a fine line there between once a year to, again, every weekend. Sherry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not worried about passing along any increased costs to the owner of these properties. Like they're in this to make money, and I don't think we need to be worried about there's an extra fee. And I think anything that we can do to discourage the quick and easy, I'm going to buy a property and set it up and make a quick buck is better for everybody in our township. So I just want to make sure that I know there's still there's lots more to talk about within the report, and I don't want to get it off base, but I'm trying to limit myself here to what the discussion is actually about.
Okay, Jim, Councillor Hogg had his hand up, and then Jennifer.
I was wondering, how will this affect the tax base? Because this now becomes a business.
If they get licensed.
If they get licensed. My daughter just went to an Airbnb last weekend in Collingwood, and she paid $200 a night just for the 2 of them, which is pretty expensive. It's that's big money. So I just wondered how you propose that is just ordinary business? Is that what they would be taxed under if they get accepted?
Business tax, wouldn't it?
As far as I know, they're still classified as single detached dwellings through MPAC. This is something that we could ask Kathy about. But as far as I know, they aren't paying any business taxes like they would for if it was a commercial, if it was zoned commercial operating as a store or a hotel. So that is something that we can ask Kathy, if she can look into, or actually the treasurer probably, our new treasurer, to look into taxing Airbnbs or short-term rentals. I just wanted to go back to the whole septic review thing. Before, if council decides to proceed with licensing, before a licensing bylaw is passed, it will be my recommendation that it go through legal review. So we can ask our solicitors whether or not we can ask for a septic review. If we have the ability to ask for a septic review and all it costs them is $400 or $450, then they have to do it. But we can run it through them to make sure that we have the ability to ask them for that.
Okay. Councillor Booth?
I guess just adding on to Deputy Mayor Gibson's idea of, we don't care really about the cost because they're doing it for money. Is there anywhere in here, Jennifer, that talks about the staff time that it's going to take Daryl or somebody from planning and obviously fire, that they're going to have to go out there, and we're looking at spending quite a bit of time initially to check all these things out, and that this is not going to be a 5-minute little inspection type thing. Is there something that we can charge them that?
Yes. Oh yeah, we'll be updating our fee bylaws. There will be a licensing fee, and then there'll be a fire inspection fee and a building inspection fee. I think we discussed when we reviewed it with staff, like $100 building inspection fee, $100 fire. I think the fire inspection fee right now is $100. So we said $100 for building inspection fee, $100 for fire inspection fee, and then a licensing fee of, I don't know, some places charge $250, some places charge $400 or $700. So the municipality would need to establish what the licensing fee would be. And once it's in force and effect, really the brunt of it is going to go through the clerk's department, because it's a licensing through, well, the clerk's department, the fire department, and the building department, but the planning department gets out of it once we pass the zoning. Because it's being passed, the licensing bylaw goes through the Municipal Act. So it's not kind of a planning act process, even though it's a land use issue. But the way I envisage it, and Pat and I had discussed it, she said, so will this be the clerk's department looking after this? And I said, yes. So the applications and the paperwork will be going through the clerk's department, who will then circulate them to the building department. She will circulate them to the building department, the fire department, for their inspections. She'll probably say, is it a permitted use from a planning perspective, because we are permitting it in a number of, we're proposing that it would be permitted in a number of zones. Say, is it a permitted use? Yes, it's a permitted use. And then they'd go on with their inspections and that sort of thing. But we can charge fees, and we would have to update our municipal fee bylaw to reflect those fees.
Good. I just want to make sure, I mean, we're going over and above what the average taxpayer would require from us, right? And
Yeah.
these people are running a business, so I don't think it should cost any of the taxpayers, anything for these people to be inspected. It should be all on their dime.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Especially when 2 can be in a cottage and they've got 40 at whatever they're charging. Councillor Phillip?
Yes, I would say that the charges should be rigorous enough that there's absolutely no cost to our residents. And in fact, I would go beyond that and make it profitable for the township, if you know what I mean.
I agree.
I like that too.
I agree.
That might even be something, Jennifer, that we look at. Maybe it's a different fee for an Airbnb. So it's not like a fire inspection for a normal resident that's doing something, that if they're running a business and you're going out there and spending a little bit of extra time, that maybe an Airbnb fire inspection or planning is an extra added cost.
I'm not so sure if we can do that. Can we, Jennifer?
Let's ask
Jennifer?
somebody to find out.
Through you, Mayor Latchford. I'm not sure whether you, oh, this is going to be a question for Pat, but I did speak to Ingrid, who is the administrator for the Airbnbs. I think she's in the building department in Huntsville, which is where this licensing bylaw is based off of. I had a lovely, very good, productive conversation with her. And their licensing bylaw, the fees for, if it's somebody's primary residence, so if that's their main dwelling, that's where they get their taxes mailed to, that's where all their mailing goes to. The licensing fee is $500. If it's a secondary dwelling, then it's a $750 licensing fee. So they differentiate between if it's your main dwelling or if it's a secondary dwelling.
Sherry?
Yeah, thanks. While we're on the subject of fees, I just wanted, one of the notations that I'd made when I had read through the report, that I think the fees are too low. I think, you know, I think this is going to take up a lot of staff time, and we're likely going to have to hire somebody for it. I'm not sure that we've got the staffing that we're going to need to cover. And I think, you know, we really need to have a good look at what those fees are. And as my colleagues have said, I think, you know, this has to be at no cost to our residents. And, you know, and if we're, you know, if it's somewhat profitable, you know, that allows for all of those expenses that we don't account for. So I would like to, you know, I'd like to see those fees raised, and I don't know if you do we can work with the treasurer on any kind of number crunching for what the actual cost is going to be for the township.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything further? Because we can move on with those after the conversation. Give Jennifer a chance to bring all this back, and Daryl, his input. Sure.
I wasn't sure if Jennifer's not going to continue on and speak to the report. I did have some other concerns that I wanted to bring up, but I don't want to interject before she's had an opportunity to speak to the remainder of her report.
Your concerns are?
Well, I had some concerns on parking spaces, on grandfathering, on fees, on the time limitation for infractions, on existing cottage rentals. So there's a few things. And then I did want to speak to some of the concerns that were brought up by the delegations.
Okay. I had a couple of things too, but I'm good with that. Everybody else says you want Jennifer to highlight this?
Okay, I could just go through, I think I'll just go through a bit of a general, continue with a general review, and then we'll get into the comments that you have, because the purpose of this was a draft for council's review and input. In the zoning bylaw, I have currently proposed that that short-term rentals be permitted in the rural, agricultural, rural residential, hamlet residential, shoreline residential, limited service residential, Oak Ridges Moraine Core, Oak Ridges Moraine Linkage, and Oak Ridges Moraine Countryside zones. Now, those are all zones that permit bed and breakfast establishments. My only question was the limited service residential zone. Those are properties that are generally on private roads. So the rest of the properties, they have frontage on year-round maintained municipal roads. I didn't know if council wanted to preclude short-term rentals on properties with private roads. I should note that a bed and breakfast is not a permitted use in the limited service residential zone. It is a permitted use in the remainder of the zones.
Sherry?
Yeah, through you to Jennifer. Jennifer, did the fire chief have any concerns about the private roads? Because I'm thinking about, we've, several in our township where, there has been difficulty getting our vehicles, our emergency vehicles in and out. And, I think that puts us, I think, due diligence for anybody who may be unawares renting a place, that, if there's an emergency, it's going to be tough responding.
Yes, I don't recall when I reviewed it with him, he did not see the report that council received. He received a copy of the draft licensing bylaw and the draft zoning bylaw amendment. At that point in time, we didn't have a discussion regarding the seasonal roads.
Yeah, because not having given it a lot of thought, but my gut reaction is that we should be staying away from private roads, licensing any establishments on private roads.
I think so too, because they're maintained, the majority or all of them are maintained by the residents all winter.
Yeah, okay, so that was one zone where I was back and forth on, and I wanted council's input on it because they are private roads. They're not municipally maintained roads. So we could remove short-term rental accommodations as a permitted use in the limited service residential zone.
Okay.
I think that's really worth looking at because it's if people come down and rent and they have no idea.
That is going to
potential lawsuit.
Yep, it is going to impact a number of the short-term rental accommodation properties on Rice Lake because there are numerous private roads that ring Rice Lake. And another thing that came up during one of the delegations regarding Curtis Point Road, that those properties on Curtis Point Road are zoned limited service residential. And the limited service residential zone is generally for a seasonal dwelling. I know that some of them have been converted and people are living there year round, but the intention of that zone is for seasonal dwellings. So that was just one thing that I wanted to, one point I wanted to bring up. Okay, back to our, my report. Okay, so we dealt with the zoning. And on the Oak Ridges Moraine, I've recommended that the short-term rental accommodations be included as a permitted use in those zones that already permit a bed and breakfast establishment. So if a bed and breakfast is permitted, then I've suggested including short-term rental accommodation as a permitted use also. Then in the financial impact, we've discussed the fact that there will be licensing fees, inspection fees. There will be costs for the municipality in terms of implementing the zoning bylaw amendment. We'll have to have a public meeting, that's advertising costs. Now enforcement. I believe that the draft 2022 budget contained money, additional money for bylaw enforcement. because it is recognized that we will need more bylaw enforcement staff that will be staff or services that will be available on the weekends and during the evening hours that can go to attend sites upon complaints and do and undertake an investigation. Because right now our bylaw enforcement officer is also our chief building official, and that's a part of his job. But with we saw last year, there were a number of bylaw or complaints about short-term rental accommodations. So there will need to be some additional time, bylaw time for investigations for short-term complaints regarding short-term rental accommodations.
Mike?
Would like to comment on Jen's past point about private roads. I think you can expect unbelievable amount of heat as a result of eliminating or restricting these rentals off of private roads. And I think we'll get quite a legal pushback, and I think we'll get a push for grandfathering what's in place. I agree that I agree with the feeling that private roads shouldn't accommodate such, but I want to warn my fellow councillors and the mayor and deputy mayor that I can see litigation coming here in a big way, because these people have bought the property with the under the guise of making some money, and now we're going to claw that whole concept back. It is going to be a dog's breakfast. That's my comment there.
Thanks, Mike. Do we know that they were all purchased for that's the other thing, were they all purposed for Airbnbs? Because a complaint I got was these people bought the place, they were so thrilled with it that they'd be able to come to their cottage and bring their family, and the next thing you know, they're not there, it's rented out. So I guess it depends on their honesty up front. So we've had a lot of scenarios. But
Mayor,
good point to be looked up and checked maybe before they're totally taken out, or we.
Well, and I think that comes with our legal opinion. I mean, that can be something that we ask specifically about, but I guess I say, let's be leaders in this.
Yeah. And the other thing I would mention, going back to the septic services, would it be appropriate, since we have so many on Rice Lake as a municipality, if we request the county for their opinion on whether or not they should come out and check those systems? Maybe even do that through Daryl's department, since that's more under him, but we could send a letter to county and ask, because they're going to be dealing with this across the county. That's just a suggestion. We can discuss that later, but at least it gets noted today. Okay, so enforcement, we're past enforcement. Jennifer?
Jennifer, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. In the report, the next section is next steps, and I think that perhaps we're not where I thought we might be. I think what I'm hearing now is that maybe we should have another draft of the bylaw, licensing bylaw and zone provisions to come back to council for their review. prior to scheduling a public meeting. Or alternatively, I can update the licensing bylaw and the draft zoning bylaw amendment, and we can schedule our public meeting. But council may want to have another look at the bylaw before we schedule a public meeting. And in this case, I'm going to recommend that we hold a public meeting to solicit comments and input from people, but that a decision not be made that day. Usually for our zoning bylaw amendments that are a condition of consent and that sort of thing, you generally pass a bylaw the same day you have the public meeting. In this case, I'm going to recommend that you have a public meeting, you receive the input, consider the input, and then you can revise the bylaws if necessary.
Okay, and overall, that also gives both sides a chance to speak.
Yeah, it gives people who run short-term rentals. I do have one email from somebody who runs a short-term rental, and as I said, they had some suggestions for licensing and that sort of thing. I don't think anything contrary to what is contained in our draft bylaws, but also concerned that council was going to be prohibiting short-term rentals outright, because there are people that have short-term rentals in the municipality. And again, we've received no complaints about them. So
that's good landlords, and they need the opportunity to speak as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess at this point in time, I think council have all had a chance to review the draft licensing bylaw. Another thing I just want to twig people to is the requirement in the licensing bylaw that if the landowner or landlord is an absent landlord, that they have what I'm called a responsible person designated that can be contacted by municipal bylaw staff and be available on the site in a expedient manner. So that means that if we receive a complaint about a Airbnb or a short-term rental accommodation, the bylaw officer has a contact number to contact, and that person can be at the site within an hour.
Okay. Any comments on that? Sherry, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. There was just a couple of things that I wanted to comment on, Jennifer, before we moved on. And that was, I'm presuming based on the way that this is written up, that we are not going to be allowing any grandfathering, that anybody who has a short-term rental will need to apply for a license. That's correct, right?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, and I also want to just comment. You know, we've talked a lot. I think this is worst case scenario. I still think there's probably a lot of landlords within our township that are offering short term that are excellent. You know, offering excellent amenities, and you know, I think what we're trying to do here is ensure that we, you know, look at worst case scenarios. So you addressed my concerns somewhat about the parking space. I was a little worried about people pulling out onto, you know, front lawns and then septics getting crushed and all that. But I think, you know, you've addressed that. I wasn't really thrilled with allowing people into rooms that had a pull-out couch or a Murphy bed, because I think that, I mean, you could put a Murphy bed in just about anywhere and incorporate it into part of your furniture. I think that could really increase the number of people allowed within that. My personal thought, my personal opinion would be to have that particular bullet pulled out. pullouts and Murphy beds. And I also think I would like to see the number, like the 3 infractions increase from every 6 months to a 12-month period, especially when we're starting out, because I think that gives us a little more control initially. And I did like the comments that some of our delegators made in regard to density and ensuring that we look overall at the neighborhood. I don't know if you can control that, but I think it's, I try to put myself in, somebody else's shoes and what might it be like for me if I had, a short-term rental beside me. I think that covers everything that was really important to me. The only other thing I wondered about was what's going to happen to the person, as the mayor alluded to, who has a cottage and rents it out occasionally? Does this bylaw cover off that scenario? And that's it. I'll stop talking now.
Jennifer?
I believe that it would cover the person that's going to, I should lower my hand. I believe that it would cover the person who rents out their cottage, if they meet the definition of short-term rental, which is renting it out for a period of less than 30 days. Then yes, I believe that they would be covered under that, even though they only do it a couple of times. Increasing the number of infractions or permitting them over a 12-month period, not a problem. The density issue, I reviewed Brighton's draft official plan policies and draft zoning bylaw amendment policies, and I thought that they would be quite challenging for the municipality to enforce with our resources that we have. When I read them the first time, I was confused, and then I read them again and I still found them to be cumbersome. So I guess if directed by council, I can go back and do that. I prefer the approach taken with this Huntsville model that I'm basing ours on. I just find it to be clear. I find it to be, I think in speaking with them, they've been able to enforce it relatively well. They've had success with it. So that's just my opinion. However, if council wants to do a density requirement, we can do it. I think it's going to be, then it comes to a situation where first one up to bat, one neighbor has an Airbnb, then the other neighbor can't have one. And that runs into problems too. So it's up to council. If you want to pursue that, we can go that route. It's just a different approach. I thought by including the draft licensing provisions that we've included, that we could address the behaviors or the issues that have become concerns, which are basically noise and overcrowding and parking and that sort of thing.
Okay. Anything further? I mean, we have to be careful too. We have businesses that are established, have gone through all the rules and bringing in a lot of tourism and dollars to our area. So we don't, good, loyal businesses in the township, we don't want it to affect them. But I think, the main reason for this is to get under control some of the things that are happening. We have generational cottage owners who might rent their cottage out to a family member or a close friend for a few days or a week. I'm not really too concerned about them. They're not a business. They don't want that sort of a thing. So we've got to protect them as well. Mike?
I must say I was very taken with Valerie's point around people using the local community dock. The argument that she made, I thought, really rang home. And I'm not sure how planning can help that. They may not be able to, but it really rings home for me that, you know, here the community has built and maintained this recreational space for their community, and then somebody whom they don't know on a back lot brings 20 people to the dock for the week. You know, wow, that really hits home, and I'm not sure if we're able to do anything about that. Maybe it's the community that enforces that themselves in as kind of way as possible. But you know, I didn't see that one coming, and so I think that'll be an interesting conversation for council in the future. Thank you.
But if it's a deeded access, those on the deed own that piece of ground.
Sure they do, but I think you can see how that could create a real problem for the community.
Yes, because the guests, the majority of the guests would never know that it's actually private
Absolutely.
property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daryl, you had your hand up, and then maybe we can wrap up.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Through you, Mayor. I just wanted the council to be aware as we're going through this short-term rental bylaw, the proposal. One of the issues we ran into last year was the noise. And I think some of the delegates spoke about the noise. Our noise bylaw as it stands today doesn't talk about timelines for different noises other than construction equipment and lawnmowers and stuff. So I just wanted council to be aware we are in the midst. Susan's working on it right now of adding a schedule to our noise bylaw. We've done some research at some other municipalities that deal with Airbnbs or short-term rentals and what they have in their noise bylaw. So we'll have a draft together here shortly for council's review to either create a new noise bylaw or amend our noise bylaw to add a schedule, which will talk about different timelines for noise, you know, including fireworks, loudspeakers, and so forth and so on with stuff like that in that schedule. Now, as far as enforcing that, well, we talked about enforcement, like Jennifer mentioned, council under their direction, there was some money put in the proposed budget this year to help out with bylaw enforcement. So once the budget is approved, if that money's there, then I have reached out to different companies that do bylaw enforcement for municipalities. So that is, you know, the intent to help us out for weekends, nights, different times, maybe even during the day, to help enforce some of these bylaws, which includes the noise bylaw on weekends and nights. So I just want council to be aware we are working on redoing our noise bylaw to accommodate for different you know, timelines in a schedule. So
Thanks, Jill. Maybe they need to be chargebacks after a couple of warnings. If it's going to keep up, we charge you back.
There is that in our noise bylaw already. There is a section for the charge.
Okay. So Sherry made the motion and Greg seconded that we reviewed it today. And so I'm thinking, Sherry, that we're now, as Jennifer and we've all discussed, taking it back for review and bringing a new presentation forward. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Or do you want to word it differently or?
No, I would say that we approve Jennifer's report and send her back to, to look
Receive.
into the recommendations as discussed.
So receive Jennifer's report.
Receive, sorry.
That's
So
okay.
Jennifer, I don't know if that's too broad for you, but.
Jennifer?
I just want to get some clarification. Receive the report. I'll amend the report or review the report and amend as I see what I think council wants to see, and then bring it back to the February municipal planning meeting, at which time, hopefully, I'll receive direction to proceed with a plan, with a public meeting. Is that correct? So bring it back for council's review once more.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if the delegation members who spoke would like a copy of that. We make sure they get one directly. You good with that?
Of the revised report, once it's been published, once council receives it, we can send it to them.
Okay, that's yes, I'm in agreement with that. Okay. They've done well today with all their inputs, so. Okay, and Greg, you second that? You're okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor? Carried. We haven't had that long of a discussion on anything for quite some time. Okay, our next report is Planning Report 2022 PED-04, Bill 13 and Bill 276, changes to the Planning Act. Can I have an order to get that on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Booth, second by Councillor Phillips. Okay. Ready, Jennifer, for a little brief on this one?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Latchford. At a previous council meeting, council asked that I bring forward a report on changes to the Planning Act that have come into force and effect. Bill 13, Schedule 19 of Bill 13 specifically came into force and effect on December 2nd of 2021 and made some changes to the Planning Act. Specifically, they Schedule 19 allows for the delegation of authority to either committees of council or staff for minor zoning bylaw amendments such as temporary use bylaws, lifting of holding provisions. If council decided they wanted to proceed with the delegation of those authority, they need to establish some official plan amendment policies for that, define what type of application specifically would be delegated to a committee of council or staff. The Planning Act already has sections and allows for the delegation of authority for community planning permits, system permits, approval of adopted lower tier official plan amendments, plans of subdivision and condominiums, consents, site plans, and validations. Currently, the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman has not delegated authority for any of these planning decisions. So I don't really see that you would be doing that at this point. Some municipalities, particularly large cities, have huge bureaucracies that make it difficult for planning applications to meet the statutory planning times that they have that are established in the Planning Act. We don't have that problem here. When I get an application, it can get to council. We can meet our statutory deadlines. We only have 2 applications in which we haven't met our statutory deadlines. And those are 2 applications where the applicants have requested that that decisions be deferred. So we don't have a difficulty meeting our deadlines as required by the Planning Act. Bill 276 received royal assent on June 3rd, and Schedule 24 of the bill came into force and effect on January 1st. And it contains some changes to the consent process. And specifically, one of the ones that's quite interesting is it allows for subdivision, the subdivision of properties that have merged and would prevent the merging of lots where they were previously owned by joint tenants and where the ownership would have otherwise merged when one of the joint tenants died. So that it will only affect those lot mergers, though. It won't affect lot mergers that have occurred through other circumstances where somebody buys two lots that abut each other. They weren't created through the Planning Act, and they merge on title. It only prevents the merger on the death of a joint tenant. So it's a very specific situation. There are also changes to the consent application process, which allow for the purchaser to apply for a consent before they own a property. Right now, if somebody wants to apply for a consent before they own the property, generally what happens is they appoint an agent to act, or they appoint the new owner to act as an agent. They establish a new certificate of cancellation. I haven't completely got my head around that one yet. I'm looking into it. Provides for certificates on the retained lot in addition to the severed lot. Right now, when we're doing severances, a certificate of official is issued when the owner has fulfilled all of the conditions of consent. This provision allows for a certificate to be issued for the retained parcel. If somebody wants that certificate, they have to make that note in their application. There's also the period for which conditions of consent have to be met has been increased to 2 years from 1 year. And lastly, permit a consent to be revised by the applicant before a decision is made. So that's a summary of the changes. There was an FAQ sheet that was provided by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that was attached to this, I attached to the report.
So my question, I think, is similar to what you're thinking about, Jennifer, is to establish a new certificate of cancellation. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. The certificate of cancellation, in my review of it, it seems that it would come into effect where if somebody has done a lot addition to add additional lands to another lot that was previously subject to a consent and a certificate had been issued for the previous consent, then they would no longer need the previous decision, the previous certificate. I'm going to join the what is it? Association of the Committees of Adjustment. For $150, I can join the Association of the Committees of Adjustment, and they have a lot of information seminars and that sort of thing on severances and that. So I'm going to submit a membership to that and get hold of their resources, because through their conferences and their resources that they publish, there's a lot of good information there. So that's precipitated that membership.
So just by what you're saying there, is it changes to what pre-existed? So if somebody did a lot line adjustment, and now what are they coming back to do, to just cancel that lot line adjustment if the circumstances have changed and say it was a sale? Is that the idea?
I don't think so. I think what it is is if there was a lot created by severance and a certificate of official was issued for it, and then they subsequently came back and did a lot addition to that previous, the previously severed lot. What I think it means is that the certificate of official for the previous lot is now voided because you've got a new expanded lot.
Yes.
But I am not clear on that. I need to get clarification on that one. I called a more seasoned committee of adjustment person, and they said they still don't have their head around it completely yet either.
Well, you couldn't, because I was thinking you couldn't, if you created a lot and then you want to do a lot line adjustment when you're adding to that lot, then you'd almost, the other first lot is gone because
because you're adding land to it.
The lot size for some reason.
So I believe that is what it means, but again, I need clarification on that.
Yeah, because somebody might need a bit extra to do.
I don't see, if we receive a request for this, I will be consulting with our municipal solicitors on it to ensure that we're doing it correctly.
So if we both understand it as that right now, then to me, that makes sense.
Yes.
If that's what it's saying.
If that's what it's saying.
Yeah, okay. I'm good with that one. So these are all changes now that are in the Planning Act. And we have a committee of adjustment, so we've delegated authority to a committee of adjustment, even though we're the committee of adjustment, which is fine. Any further comments from council? You want, and I agree with Jennifer as well. A lot of this is bureaucratic red tape in the big cities that doesn't apply generally to us at all. So, any further comments? Don't want to make any changes to what we have now, other than we got to find out someday about that certificate of cancellation. Just verification of it, clarification of it. But I would assume that's what it was, what we said. Did I get a mover yet? Could I have a mover?
Yes, you had Councillor Booth and Councillor Phillip.
I didn't write them down. So Mike or Greg, just to receive it as it is.
Yep.
Receive and file. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Our next item is item 9. It's the bylaws. And the first one is amending James Starr's zoning. Be it resolved that bylaw number 05-2022, being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw number 19-2019 as amended of the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman for James Starr, concession 10, part of lot 21, geographic Haldeman, be read and deemed to be passed this 27th day of January, 2022. Have a mover?
So moved.
Deputy Mayor Gibson, second. Councillor Hogg, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 06-2022, and this is the approval for Curtis and Liz Wilson's for their rezoning. Be it resolved that bylaw number 06-2022, being a bylaw to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw number 19-2019 as amended of the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman for Curtis and Liz Wilson, concession 3, part of lot 11, geographic alderman, be read and deemed to be passed this 27th day of January 2022. Have a mover? Deputy Mayor Gibson, second. Councillor Phil, all in favor? Carried. Bylaw number 15-2022 is the confirmation of hiring Nicole Bahun. Be it resolved, how do you pronounce that, Pat? I better say it right.
It's Behoon.
B. Okay. Be it resolved that bylaw number 15-2022, being a bylaw to appoint a treasurer for the corporation of the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman, Nicole Leach Behoon, be read and deemed to be passed this 27th day of January 2022. Have a mover? Councillor Booth, second. Councillor Hogg, all in favor? Carried. Are there any announcements or notice of motions planning related? Deputy Mayor Gibson?
No.
Councillor Phil?
No.
Councillor Booth?
No.
Councillor Hogg?
No, I don't.
And I don't have any either today. Item 11, closed session notice. Following the adjournment of the municipal planning meeting of Thursday, January 27th, 2022, the Council of the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman will be holding a closed session in accordance with Section 2392B of the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, to discuss personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, and to discuss litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, with the CAO, senior planner, acting clerk, administrative assistants, B&P, and chief building official remaining in attendance. Bylaw number 16-2022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Municipal Planning Act of Thursday, January 27th, be read and deemed to be passed this 27th day of January 2022. Could I have a motion for that, please? Confirming bylaw. Sherry, second. Jim, all in favor? Carried. And item 13 is motion to adjourn at 11:31 a.m. Mover? Sherry? Second. Jim? All in favor? Carried. So do you want to come back at 11:45 12:45 or 11:45, sorry.
Through you,
So
Mayor
Susan will-
Latchford. Oh.
Yes, Susan?
I was just going to say that I will send out a new link for the meeting.
Thank you. I know, that's what I was thinking. I got a blank.